Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to That's a Take. My name is Bruce James Bales, and I am your host on this filmmaking podcast journey. I'm very excited that you're here with me again today for Take 2, and I wanted to take a second to just thank everyone for listening to Take 1, for reaching out with some kind words, kind messages, sharing the podcast. Really just warmed my heart that people, gravitated towards the conversation with Marissa Vaughn and took some valuable information away from it. That's the goal of this podcast. And, those kind words and messages are something that really keeps me going on this podcast and keeps me inspired for, the next episode. And speaking of the next episode, we are here for Take 2. And today our guest is Kristian Day. Kristian Day is a writer, producer, and showrunner who came up from the below-the-line production world, working in every department except for food styling. Born and raised in the Midwest, he cut his teeth working as a local when out-of-town commercials and shows would come through Iowa for a week at a time. In 2017, he started making a series of no-budget documentaries and began his long collaboration with Dylan Sires on the Max original series Taken Together. Day made his debut as a showrunner with the Out TV original The Last American Gay Bar, which premiered on July 3rd, 2024. In December 2024, Amazon Studio released Chiefsaholic, a wolf in Chiefs clothing that he produced with Sires. Kristian hosts the syndicated radio show / podcast Iowa Basement Tapes, and is also a narrative nonfiction writer who's contributed to genre magazines including Fangoria and Horror Hound, along with the Des Moines, Iowa-based publication City View. He is currently shopping his debut novella, Fuck This Show, a memoir of a self-destructive reality TV producer desperately clawing his way out of making the world's worst television. And today, Kristian will be talking to us about the fundamentals of producing. Kristian is a member of the PGA, the Producers Guild of America, and we had a great conversation about what a producer is, what the different types of producers do, and kind of a run through of what his days look like in post-production, in pre-production, and during production. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Kristian Day.
Well, years ago, you made fun of me and said that, I would talk about music with basement tapes. And you're like, I had this tape from my cousin's band. Only 4 copies exist.
Yeah.
I have the last one. The rest went and got moldy in the sewer. I don't know.
That's kind of your thing,
It's
though.
Deep cut all the time.
Yeah, that's your thing. Yeah. But okay, well, I'm going to jump right into it. We're here today to talk about producing and what the hell a producer does. And I know you have some hot takes on that probably, but, the point of this podcast is to provide some educational tools for people. And I've found, in my experience, that the producer has some mysticism behind it, which is when you're making low budget, no budget movies, nobody really knows what a producer actually does. And it's kind of almost a producer. It's hard for the producer to exist at that level in a true fashion, right?
Correct. So let's go to the very beginnings of things. So a producer from a bare bones position, or even an entity. The producer normally owns or is employed by the production company. Now, in my situation, Daylight Pictures, which is part of Kristian Day Media, which encompasses everything, that's the producing entity. So a lot of times as a producer, I'm running the business that is executing and rendering services, and that is, employing a director, employing the crew, seeing things from beginning to end. So that's if money's in place, I'm in charge of setting up what's called the SPV, the Special Performance Vehicle. It's an LLC specifically made for the movie that is created and owned / ran by Kristian Day Media LLC, which is the parent company.
Yep.
So, and then I'm in charge of setting up all the insurance. And again, if it's in a state technically we should do this everywhere, I'm the one in charge of setting up entertainment payroll. And then I hire either an EIC, an executive in charge, or a line producer who then manages a lot of the financial side and also manages a lot of the physical production side if I'm involved with something else. Now, smaller productions, sometimes that's me, Yeah. So in commercials, I in the commercial world, I do not hire a line producer. I am fully capable of doing that myself, just by following the simple AICP format for budgeting and
what is
actuals.
AICP?
If I can say this correctly, it's the American Independent Commercial Producers, something like that. Yeah. But they're basically, it's like the intermediary between production companies, producers, and agencies. So there's standards. So when you talk about standard budgets, I mean, I've shown you my budgets when I do them. That format, which is you can get it with true budget or hot budget, 0.0, and that's the standard because that has the transparency to show whoever your client is, or whoever is giving you the money to execute, like where the money's going.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I am, as far as I've seen in this market, as in Iowa, Des Moines, whatever, I'm the only one who uses that. And I do it because it does show the transparency. A lot of ways that production companies do it here in this market is they just mark everything up and they try to get someone at a lower rate than what the actual line is. And then they try to hope to profit off that. Whereas the way I do it, I show what everyone's rate is, and then it shows at the bottom percentage for profit, and I usually tag on 10% of everything that's on there that I don't own. So like gear, if it's my gear, I don't charge an additional 10% on it. But it shows to whoever I'm working with, this is where your money's going and what it is. And I have to sometimes explain, like, my personal labor for doing something is not my profit. That's two different things.
Yeah.
Because that profit pays for like the studio space, pays for the insurance and all those things. So and that's in the commercial. Now in the movie world, a lot of it is the same. But for like documentary, if I'm producing and directing it, I'll do all those same things, but then I'll go after the money.
Yeah.
If I'm looking for something bigger that might be out of my scale, I'll try to partner with a larger entity. Obviously, like Chiefs was done with 2 other companies because they had experience with rendering services for a large streaming service like Amazon.
Yeah, and Chiefs, he refers to Chiefs as Chiefsaholic, which is on Amazon Prime, directed by Dylan Sayers, produced by Kristian.
And shot by Bruce James Bales.
Yeah.
Now with narrative, like right now I'm been putting together a project for Anna Gaskell, and in those situations, she's a first-time director. If I truly believe in the project, I will accompany with trying to secure the financing together. If it's a first-time director who comes to me and says, I'm trying to make this movie, I kind of require them to, like, you need to come with your money together if you want me to render services for you.
Yeah.
Because that is such a rat race.
Yeah, and living in this market too, like, you're not that close to the money, so that's not something you focus on a lot, is bringing the money to a production.
No, and the thing is like, that's why I kind of tell people, like, hey, if you want to do this, like, that's like whenever people want to have meetings with me, that is like the first thing I want to talk about. How do I get money? And I'm like, I don't know, because it's just not, and for me, I can't spin myself into the ground looking for financing for a project that A is not mine, B, that you can spend years trying to put money together on things. And that's just not, I mean, this is already an extremely difficult industry. The last thing I want to do is just waste my time, like, finding dead ends, waiting for financing to get together. So I guess, like, on the day, once, like, everything's in order, like, I try to manage all the logistics and try to manage the director and the production side. So if there are executive producers, or if there's a network involved, I'm usually the go-between on that. And a lot of the times I'm the shield, so they don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
For like commercials, sometimes when I get hired on to subcontract for another company to produce for them, I will, when I come in, I kind of take over all conversations with client and vendors, and kind of funnel the information. Sometimes I retract information because it's not, sometimes I'll see something like, this is going to open up a whole other can of worms, so I'm not even going to mention this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the conduit to get everything done. And I mean, I guess really it's the conduit between the creative, the vendors, which is all your crew, your client or your network, whoever's buying your project or paying for it. And that can be, there's some days that are fine. It's easy. There's some days that I'm just like, you've absorbed so much abuse and you're just like, this sucks.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that a producer is responsible for logistics, business operations, and then also, would you say that it's a producer's job to also deliver the project on time and on budget?
Yes, and that can be tricky because sometimes I've only worked on a couple projects where we had to have a conversation, me and the network or me and whoever was in charge, about maybe removing a director because they weren't going to get it to the finish line.
Yeah.
And that's a hard conversation. And now normally it doesn't affect their credit, doesn't affect anything. It's just, I have to remove you from the equation so we can get this done.
Yeah.
And you have to start making decisions that I don't have time for this director to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, and the one thing I am fairly good at under a lot of pressure is making a decision, good or bad, maybe bad, but I'll make the decision and then just own it. Like, this is the way we're going to get it done. Because there's one thing I'll say is, whether it be a commercial or whatever, I go into something thinking there's no more money after this because you can't expect that. And so,
well, nobody likes you to come back again and ask for more money.
No, they're like, well, what'd you do? And I'm like, it's gone. But I mean, I've had those things happen. I've had, I've had large chunks of a budget taken out, which should not have been taken out. Not by my choice, but it's my job to clean up the mess afterwards. And that's really hard. So there's a lot of financial responsibility on me throughout those projects.
And does that responsibility change with the sort of different types of producers, whether it's executive, associate, assistant, line producers? And so can we talk a little bit about some of the difference of these different producers?
Yeah.
And one more question to add on here is, does a UPM follow under a producer?
Kind of.
Okay. And a UPM is a unit production manager.
Yeah, and that's the union title for it. Okay. In a non-union situation, it's just PM.
Got it.
Unit production manager is really just, that's the title for that position in a narrative film or a union narrative film. When I would do PM work on unscripted, it was just PM.
Yeah.
And they are basically an extension of the line producer. They usually don't have much to say. Like, they can't make financial decisions, but they will go to the person above for approval. They'll get like the numbers together, and but they'll also handle making sure payroll's done and all those things.
Business operations and logistics.
Yeah, but they will not make, they usually, all financial decisions have to be made by me at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
and so these line producers are probably the type of producers most people who are on set and crew are most familiar with collaborating with.
Yeah, the LP and their LPs are very important because they are the ones who know the budget. They know how to move things around. They know how to pad where they need to in case something happens. So and they know the rates, so they know, like, for example, if you're putting together an indie feature, you a lot of times will want to hire a line producer to write your budget for you, and they will charge you, which sounds like a lot. Probably people who are listening, it's like $5,000 to $10,000 just to write the budget, because that budget they can take, they'll write it in such a way that you get greenlit.
Yeah,
because they're like, oh, this is a, you've heard me say this. This is an honest budget. This is how much it costs to make the thing.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of people will pay a first AD, $2,000 to $5,000 to write a schedule for them, while they're trying to get their stuff together. So you want to talk about like the different, like, executives, APs, associate producers, and all these things kind of change within whatever type of media you do.
Yes. Yep.
So
let's focus on narrative.
Yeah. Okay. Executive producer is usually the person from a lot of times it's the salaried position within a production company. The head of the company is the EP. So Chief Saholic, Drake's an executive producer. Did you see Drake on set?
No.
Did you see an email from Drake?
Never spoke to the man.
Never spoke to the man. Does not know who Dylan Sires is, doesn't know who I am, doesn't know who you are. But there was Peter Nelson, who runs the documentary side of Dream Crew Entertainment, and he is an executive producer. He's a salaried executive producer there, so he is the one who makes the ultimate decisions. North of Now co-prod this project with them. So Andrew Renzi, who owns North of Now, him and his partner Nick Belk are executive producers.
Yes.
Now, going down from executive, but also I'll say this, sometimes people give away executive producer to someone who may have put money in, hence Drake. Producer in,
or someone that's just at the production company that is producing.
Yeah, and like, and sometimes they'll, like, if there is someone, you know, like let's use an example, Soderbergh. Soderbergh was an executive producer on Divinity. His company rendered production services on it. So
in exchange, he gets a credit.
And he gets a credit, and his name is a big enough selling point that you can put it on there. So it makes sense to say from executive producer Steven Soderbergh. Now the producers themselves are, again, they are the hands-on people who are getting the work done.
Yes. The people that the crew speaks to about logistics.
Yes. Or
getting things done.
Or why am I being let go? Or why are we doing this?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. So they're the ones who are like physically handling the overall, like oversee over this one project.
Yeah.
And there's two, there are more physical producer types. And then there's these other types that, well, there's three types. There's the physical producer types, which is, that's more my thing. I mean, it's a lot of ways I'm more of a line producer, but I don't like taking the title line producer. I just take producer because I do, as much as I dislike it. And I will explain myself here in a moment. I have to get involved with the creative, and line producer has nothing to say about the creative.
Yeah, they're literally just putting the pieces together, correct?
Yeah, they don't care. They don't, and endurance is bliss. I do have to deal with the creative. When I say have to, it's really hard because I don't necessarily want to. You know, when I'm directing something, yes, but then I want to put everything else aside and just think about the creative. When I am producing, I have so much other stuff I'm trying to like look at and say, how am I going to execute this? Then to sit there and find and discuss the meaning behind something or whatever. And I've dealt with producers who have a lot to say about the creative, but have no means of knowing how to render services or how to execute.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like working with those because I honestly, I don't care what they have to say.
And is it because you feel like they don't understand the whole process and don't understand?
They're just there to talk.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's fine. Those people do exist. But when I was with Renovo, and I remember when Linklater's producer came to the studio to look, he was there to scout to see if this is the place that Linklater could execute or make his movie there. And he was looking around and he's asking questions about the facility, asking about crew, asking about housing, asking about office space, asking about all those things that I ask for when I go in. He had nothing really to say about the creative. And I respect that more than a producer that comes in and wants to talk about story and has no idea how to make something happen.
Well, really, it's about the producer coming in, enabling the creatives to do their best job, right?
Exactly. Now, there's also a term that my lawyer coined, and I love it. It's called baggage producer. Baggage producer. Now,
I think this is a hot take coming out here.
Hot take. Baggage. It's just like you have a lot of baggage, and we've all heard that term before. Baggage. They don't really bring a lot to the table. Yeah. They could have been the person who made the phone call that connected you with the money or the producers or whoever, and now they want to have an executive producer credit, and now they want their company name on it, and they have done nothing for rendering services. All they've done is made a few phone calls.
And see, this is why producers are confusing to people.
Yes.
Like, this is one reason why, is because just in the few minutes we've been discussing this, you have producers that actually do things. You have like silent producers, you have baggage producers. So there's all these different types of producers,
yes,
not just in the title, like executive associate, but in how they operate in what they actually do for a project.
Yes, 100%.
So that's part of the mysticism behind a producer,
and that's
right?
why, and I used to be the same way when I was naive. People would hand out producer credits, and I'm just like, man, dude, stop, because it disrespects. And there's this whole thing, and I know we're going to talk about PGA later, but there's this whole thing right now, a mission statement on you have to do the work.
Yeah,
and that's the mission statement.
And that's part of the misconception of producers. I think a lot of people think that producers don't do anything sometimes because you're exposed to some producers that don't do anything.
They just hang out. Yeah, they come to set and they're sitting in the chair. Now, I've done that, but that's because I've worked my ass off to get us there.
Yeah.
And now I'm gonna just chill.
Yeah.
And let everyone do their thing. I mean, because I've been in those situations where I've pulled my hair out for weeks trying to just get us on set to get there, and then when we're there, I now have a PM who's like managing the day to day. I have an AD out there, and I can come. I'm just gonna chill for a minute because it took so much energy to get us there.
Yeah.
Now there's still stuff I'm having to deal with, but I mean, sometimes sitting quietly is my best way to do it. And I've said this before. I like being on set. I also love not being on set.
You like being in the air conditioned office by yourself.
I like being in the office sometimes while I'm like, just leave me alone, because sometimes I need quiet.
Yeah,
for sure, to solve the problem. And with email and everything or text, I'm able to do my job. And I've even had some where I've been in an office not that far away from set, and I've been able to have a monitor in case I wanted to see it.
Yeah.
And normally, no offense to everybody, I turn it off because I don't have time. I'm like, it's a distraction.
Well, you got other stuff to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because one thing I read in my research about producing and producers is this idea of like that there's no average work day for a producer. That it's like hard to say this is what my day is like, and maybe in pre-production and post-production you can say, hey, these are what the days look like. But is that true that like a producer's job is kind of hard to explain, because like one day you might be focused on something and the next day you might be focused on something completely different?
When I'm in pre-production, if we have now officed up somewhere, I will do my best to do like a 9 to 5.
Yeah, because
the one thing that we have all trained ourselves is to work around the clock, and that is a quick way to burn out. It's okay to say no. This morning I had a text asking me about a project. They're like, so I guess that talent agency is 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I'm like, yeah, it's 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, 100%. You know what? If they didn't get back to us by 5 o'clock, and technically they did, but I didn't want to tell them because that'll open that door and that gateway. I'm like,
it's Saturday.
Yeah, like the shoot that this is pertaining to is in like 3 weeks. It doesn't need to be solved on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, you can have boundaries.
And setting those boundaries, I mean, unless it's like an emergency, there's no reason to do that. And but also know like when you can set those boundaries, and knowing your position. Are you in a position to set those boundaries? Now, if we're in pre-production and we're like weeks away, yeah, I'm also going to be Monday through Friday. If it's a holiday or an event, I'm not working that day. And I'm not going to work on a Saturday or Sunday if I don't have to, because there'll be plenty of times in the future here that I will.
When you get to production.
When I get into production, I have to. So the way I look at it is, we just have to, I try to set an average day when we're rolling. Yes, things can happen, and things can happen when you're in pre-pro, but like you try to maneuver and engage in it in such a way that like you're not burning yourself out and abusing people, and it's just like if you're like advertising is one of the most abusive jobs in the world, and filmmaking can if you let it. Like to be the poor son of a bitch that has to change the Black Friday ad on Thanksgiving night because something was wrong. Yeah, it's about to happen. I mean, I'm just like, and I use that as a similarity because there's a lot of crossover between the ad world and film world for sure.
So one thing that I've really thought was interesting just hearing you talk is that a lot of like what a producer does shifts based on commercial, documentary, narrative, and then also shifts on the size of budget you're working with, the size of production. But what are skills that a producer at any of these sort of levels or types of content, what are skills that people can take across the board to be a good producer, to stick out, to help productions get across the finish line, whether it's commercial, documentary, or narrative?
I think the biggest thing, I don't want to say open communication because it's not open communication. It's communication in general. And that could be being transparent when you need to be, but then also keeping your mouth shut when you need to be. Because I've had things that I've been working on, or like I have a situation that I'm dealing with privately that I know I'm going to handle. And I may have said something to an associate producer or a PA that's working with me, and then they wander off and say something out loud. And the next time I go to get a phone call or I get called over, what's this? And it really didn't need to be that way because it would have been fixed before they would even know. They would never even know about it.
Yeah.
And it's that controlling that situation. I would say controlling the production narrative of what's going on, keeping people excited and keeping people moving, handling problems privately or with the right people to get them worked out. So when I say communication, it's both transparency when you need to be, and then redacting when you need to as well.
So knowing when to say something and knowing when not to say something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you're also, is it safe to say that as a producer, you're presented with a lot of problems? Like the first AD and the line producer, they get all the problems on set.
Yeah, no one comes and tells me something great that happened.
Yeah. So you're like dealing with all the issues.
Yeah, everything is. I mean, everything is becomes like this. Like, I mean, no one wants to talk to me unless they have a complaint.
Yeah.
No one wants to just come up and say, "Hey, I'm having a great time." No,
you did great, Kristian.
No, they want to come up and it's like, I don't feel safe, or it's raining, or it's cold, or I didn't pack the what do you call those warming hot hands that everyone was like trying to give you and you didn't take them, or they didn't pee when they needed to before we went out in the cold and they got all zipped up.
You're like a teacher, kind of.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And it's like, okay, well,
you got to get your work done, buddy.
Got to get it done. Yeah, that is. Yeah, I wish I mean, when I'm out and we're shooting, the one thing I'll say, like when something goes really well and I'm like in a producer AD role at the same time, a lot of times I'll get a high five from the director if something worked out or whatever. And everyone's happy. So I will say it's not all like I'm just the complaint box. Yeah. When I'm actually like in it, on the actual front lines, there's a lot of like pats on the back and everyone's stoked.
And you can build like really nice relationships with directors too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're my line producer forever now.
Yeah, and when I'm out there, I do see more people get excited when I'm in that position on the front lines with them. And the reason why I don't do it that often anymore is just because I there's too many other things I got to deal with, and I can't like continue to wait for us to cut so I can really quickly in the 30 seconds that we have to make a phone call to like get something done. Or like try to get a text message out to like make sure our lunch is here on time, or like where is it? So I know people do enjoy like, hey, I like it when you're AD, and I'm like, great. Well, then someone needs to do my job over here, and unfortunately, it's been tricky training people to do that job, and it's not one you can just let go and let someone do it.
It takes years.
Yeah, it takes years, and next thing you know, it's the Titanic is splitting upwards and it's splitting in half, and the band's dead. But
you have to be standing on the top deck, being calm and being like, everything's gonna be okay. Just get in the lifeboat.
Just get in the lifeboat.
Put your life jacket on. It's gonna be fine, even if sometimes you know it's not gonna be fine.
Right? Yeah. So it isn't always like I'm the complaint box. People do have a good time, and then they'll tell me like, "Hey, this was great, thank you," or whatever. And those are really good moments.
Yeah. Speaking of good moments, it had to have felt good getting into the PGA after doing just You slogged it out in reality TV for a while, and like talk about that milestone, because I think it's important to also like give yourself pats on the back and recognize milestones in the film industry, or else you can get slogged down. So like PGA is a big deal. Like congratulations, that's amazing. But like, how did it make you feel when that happened?
It was I think what made me satisfied with like really excited because that was technically the second guild I got into. The first one I got was the Location Managers Guild International. But PGA, because I was trying to figure out, like what shows that I've worked on that would like qualify, because you're in the daily grind all the time. I was taking whatever, and I remember like I felt this big lull from like 2015 to like 2017 was a huge lull because you're still like taking PA work, trying to get more experience. And it wasn't until like, I mean, it was 2016 when I got my first like producer gig. And it was for a PBS show, very low rates, but there's a lot of travel with it. And that was one thing from working Bachelor was I learned how to do travel logistics for a crew. I mean, I tried several years to get in, and in PGA's here, I want to make it known, like there's of all the unions, like so like PGA, WGA, DGA, SAG, PGA isn't like they don't necessarily have like a health, like the health services and stuff like the insurance that like WGA or DGA have or SAG. But it was like this, just kind of like this network of people that all have done the tour of duty that I've done. I got in, and it's been years from doing all the live sports stuff, for doing like Flow Sports, which was the lowest paying gig I ever had in my career. And I kept saying I didn't want to do it anymore. But when I learned that live web streams would count towards that, and it had to be minimum of like 3 hours, but like a Flow Sports gig that when I started producing for them was on average 6 hours or 8 hours.
So you're getting a lot of time.
I had it. I mean, they would fly me. I remember one I did for 4 hours, and it was rugby, and I went out to West Point.
Oh wow!
It was cool. It was cool. Like West Point was rad. And then they sent me to Farmington from some like elementary school level. It was the Connie Mack World Series, which is a baseball thing. And I mean, I had a crew of 5. I had 2 cameras, an audio mixer, and a weird PA who I don't remember his name, but I remember he was really, really strange. And those were days long. Like they were days. And when I realized that I could do the web stuff, I mean, it was just like, and I was definitely like on my outs with Flow because I was just tired of doing it. Because like, and for people, I'm not gonna talk super negative, but it was very low rates, and I was kind of moving away from that.
Yeah,
I was just tired of it. It was a very much a burnout. But my last like basically forcing their gift to me was like, I need you to write a letter for the PGA confirming that I've done these things for you. And I might as well have been holding a gunpoint at the head of production's head, because I think they knew that as soon as I didn't need them anymore.
Yeah,
this was done. But I got in 2021. I remember getting that email, and I remember a PA on a shoot. So I was so excited for it. On my coffee wrote Christian Day PGA.
Nice. And it rhymes.
It rhymes.
And it rhymes.
But there's been like a lot of great networking through it. I mean, part of how Gay Bar got made was through that network. And meeting people who produce both unscripted documentaries, narrative, whatever, are all part of that. It really, because there's 3 people I knew previously that were in it. It's not like IATSE where I could work on a show and every person there is a member of IATSE. It was just kind of like I felt like I achieved. This has been my full-time job since 2014, and that was like the first time I actually felt like this was my job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It gives some validity to it.
Yeah. Like, I didn't get here by just like, when they pull my $500 a year membership fee, sometimes I feel like, oh, there's my magazine subscription, but
yeah.
but it
means something.
It meant something to me. Even honestly, even Location Managers Guild, because I was doing locations for a long time. And, even like, and I got a lot of best practices
Yeah.
from those things.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I could have let my LMGI membership I haven't done real locations in years, and I've maintained it because it's a group of people that work a below the line position.
Yes.
That's very important. And I have yet to find someone in this state that does it the way they're supposed to, from as simple as keeping a vendor log from different parts of the state that include waste management, security, things like that.
Rentals for tables.
For tables. Like every time I unfortunately get complaints from producers that come into town, and they'll say like,
nobody has a vendor list.
No one has a vendor list just to give me, and just having that list ready to like email them, like, here you go, that's it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and we won't go down this path.
No.
It's like you start from scratch here, and like,
yeah,
unless you talk to a certain person named Kristian Day, like you start from scratch. So
you do,
and so like,
well, and I'll say this, the way people do things here is or have done it, and I'll let you edit this so it doesn't sound like I'm just being a dick, but when you haven't had when locally there hasn't been anyone requesting that information,
it doesn't seem important.
It doesn't seem important to you, and so it really, I'll tell you where it really became important for that like hot couple months when I was working on what was going to be the Field of Dreams TV show.
Yeah,
and I worked with the head of locations from NBC, and she and I wrapped, and I had a vendor list, and I gave it to her, and then then we went through the list together, and then little things would pop up, and I mean it was because that show was supposed to shoot all over the state, and discussing what we needed and what was missing, and having conversations with these vendors, and this is stuff that's again everything from security to tables and chairs, waste management, barricading, tents, things like that.
The logistics that people don't think about.
Right.
Everyone thinks about the grip truck and the camera rental, but what about where the crew eats? What about where they use the bathroom? What about where there is shade? And
then those things, people like some people just don't even care about those things.
Yeah. And that's why producers are important.
Yes, that is. And in lower budget situations, you don't have like a locations person. It all comes under this one producer person.
Yes.
That is like the one role that can absorb, if they've done the job before, can absorb those other roles.
Yes.
It becomes more of a headache, but it's not like a grip all of a sudden can't become a camera operator on set.
Yeah, not very likely.
Not very likely. Yeah. Or an art department person is now all of a sudden going to become a sound person.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. On the production side, yes. Fortunately, unfortunately, the producer can absorb part if they've done those roles and they've done the work, they can absorb those things.
Yeah.
I have in a lot of experience worked with guys that have never done those, so when they don't have a locations person, they're like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that is one benefit to me, is I know I've done that job, done it many times. I know how to do that.
Kind of wrapping up our conversation, I've learned a lot listening to you about producing, and one question I like to ask people about specific positions is like, what advice would you give young Kristian starting out as a producer 10 years ago? Like that you've taken from your 10, 15 years experience being a producer. What's like your log line for producers? Like, what is the one thing that you would tell someone?
I would say the biggest thing, and I wish I could have told myself this back in 2014 or 13 actually, was really figure out, and this doesn't sound dull, but figure out your time management. Figure out what's worth your time. And also, within that, it's how much do you care about this project? How much do you care? And I had to get in the PGA to get those landmarks, those milestones. But like I spent a lot of time working on stuff I didn't care about, and in a way I had to. I obviously didn't. I didn't come up in a situation with like my family's not rich. I wasn't set up with a trust or anything, so I've had to work. I mean, everything I've had to do, I've had to work. So there's projects I do I don't want to do. If you are in a position, I literally just said no to someone yesterday. I would say when it comes down to time management, there are things that will make you money, but there's things that are just gonna like wear you out. It's probably not worth your time. If it's low rate and you hate it, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's okay to say no to that. It's one thing if it's low rate, but you love it and you're really happy to be there and there's a future for it. We've also been in those projects like, hey, I love this idea. I think it's going to go somewhere, but then it doesn't go anywhere. And that's kind of a bummer. And sometimes you're not even in the position to make it into something bigger. It's a lot of really thinking long and hard because you get to the point where to do your best work, you have to be absolutely in love with the project at the level of either producer, director, or even writer. Even I'd say DP, like they have to, all those key positions, those 4 key positions are, you have to really be in love with the project. Subordinates, like the grip doesn't care.
Yeah.
The AC doesn't care. Technicians don't care. They're just here, tell me what you need made or done or whatever. But those key people that shape the project, you have to really, really love it. And you have to ask yourself, do I really, really love this project? Again, we're not always in the position to say no if we need the money, but and we need to work. But if you are in a position to say, like, do I love this? Because I'm about to spend a lot of time doing this, and it may not be worth it.
To kind of summarize, I think a lot of things in the film industry are like that, right? You have to do things sometimes that you don't want to, but when you get to a certain level, then you can start to decide where to put your time and energy. And you've been really good since I've known you, time management. You accomplish a lot. And I think everyone kind of says that to you, but it's because you have good time management skills. And I think taking away that, like if you take nothing away from this conversation other than that, I think you're setting people up for success to become good producers.
Yeah, I think that is the best way to look at it. Yes, the last couple of years have been fairly successful, and I've had to tell a lot of people that like I'm not going to have another year where 3 projects come out in 1 year. That's ludicrous. I could have 2, but 3. And it's only because HBO delayed the release of Taken by a year. It had nothing to do with like, oh, they have other stuff coming out, so let's do it then. It really didn't. So I just think, time management's huge. I mean, this last year, yes, 3 projects came out. Also wrote a book. Also, still doing Iowa basement tapes after almost now 6.5 years.
Taking vacations
when I can. And you try your best to not have turn a vacation into a work trip if you can. I think also, pick and choose. Like we have passion stuff. Pick and choose what's worth you giving up. If you're not getting paid, what you're giving up your time for. Yeah. So this year, this last year, I wrote a book. That was what I was going to devote my time to for non-paid work. Really, and maybe it's that whole, like, I'm raging towards 40 right now. So maybe I'm kicking it into a higher gear, but yeah, time management, folks, all of you.
But it's, I always say this phrase with film, it's feast or famine. So like when things come that you care about and that can be good for your career, you say yes to those. And then in the lean times, you focus on the things that you care about and you focus on your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when there wasn't work, I sat and wrote. That's what I did. And I'm still doing that.
And that's another example of good time management.
Because otherwise I'll sit there going stir crazy and paranoia kicks in and anxiety kicks in. And those are the things that will creep up on you if you're not careful. So, but I have to ask myself a lot, like the same things we experience here in Iowa are the same thing people experience in any other market and with a lot higher overhead to it. So I'm not like at the same time, this kind of sucks right now. It's very slow, but I am very fortunate, to be able to control a lot of factors. and I'm not going to sit here and get nervous about it. I'm going to do something for me. Yeah, I'm already starting my next big writing project while I'm trying to hustle this one. So, I think that's the best way to combat all those demons.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to sum it up for this episode of That's a Take with Kristian Day. I'm Bruce James Bales, and that is a take.